My name is Shannon Crosby. I'm a dietitian for the wellness program, and today's Learn at Lunch is worth 10 points for your healthy living program. So I want to start out by just kind of talking about how we tend to get in a rut when it comes to food shopping and the types of foods that we get, and we probably don't put too much thought into where we're purchasing our food. We have our favorite grocery stores, but I want you to think about today, does it matter where your food comes from? Is there any difference between a tomato that you purchased at the farmer's market from a local farmer versus maybe a tomato you get in a conventional grocery store that's traveled 1,500 miles to get there? Are local foods healthier for you? And that's kind of what we're going to be addressing today. Our objectives are first to define what is local food and talk about how it's increasing in popularity. We're going to talk about the benefits of eating local foods, specifically focusing on the nutritional and health benefits. And then we're going to talk about where you can purchase local food in the Springfield area. And then finally a little bit on how you can incorporate maybe some of those foods into your diet. Local foods are becoming incredibly popular in the retail food market. In fact, it's estimated to be about a $6.1 billion business. But what does it really mean to eat locally? Perceptions of what make up local food can vary based on where you live in the country. For example, in the western United States, where there aren't as ideal growing seasons, in the more desert areas, local might mean within a particular state or even a region of the United States. Here in Southwest Missouri, we tend to think of local food as food produced within the Greene County area, or maybe the surrounding counties, or even maybe in the Southwest Missouri area. According to the 2008 Farm Act, the definition of local food is that it's the food's consumption or endpoint purchase is within 400 miles of where the food is produced. But for today's presentation, I'll be talking about local food even more localized to the Southwest Missouri area. Now, there are two primary forms of local when it comes to food. We're talking about direct to consumer. So that's when you as the eater are purchasing food from the farmer, the producer, right to the eater, okay? And then another way is direct to retail. So that might mean a hospital, a school is purchasing foods directly from a farmer that's producing locally. And then a locavore is what I'm hoping to convince all of you to become, at least on some degree. And that is a person who likes to eat locally grown food. So a locavore looks for foods that are locally grown, that are seasonally available, and that are produced typically without unnecessary additives or preservatives. And that part of the definition might change depending on who you're talking to. Now, I do want to make note that local food does not always encompass organic. So you can't assume that just because food is produced locally that it's going to be organic, or that the meat is raised on pasture, or that the chickens are fed a particular diet, okay? So local food just is in reference to a geographic area, not necessarily the manner in which the food is produced. A food system is a network of food producers, so farmers. And then we also are connecting that in this chain with food consumers or eaters. And all these businesses link them together. And so a traditional food system in the United States includes production up there at the top, which is the farmer. We have processing, which might include the packaging and the labeling of food and the marketing of food. So processing is a really big component for most conventional foods here in the United States. I also want to note that processing is often the place where things are added to the food and other things are potentially removed from the food. Okay, distribution would be wholesale, warehouse, transportation. Did you know that on average our food travels about 1,500 miles? The average is 1,500 miles from the producer to the eater. So distribution is a big part of that. And then we have at the bottom here access, which might mean retail sales, and then consumption when it finally gets to your plate. And so because of this, food is often in this production chain for quite a long time before it actually gets to your plate and you're eating it. And that impacts the quality of the food, the taste of the food, and the form of the food that you see on your plate. Local farmers have the benefit of moving food through this production chain much more quickly. The food is traveling a shorter distance, and many times the farmer themselves is taking care of any processing, distribution that's going on. And they really have the benefit of that decreased amount of time. So that impacts the types of foods that they're able to use and market and sell to people. Another benefit to purchasing local from the farmer is that if there are certain aspects of food production that are important to you, like organic, or the types of foods that the animals are fed before they end up on your plate, you can ask the farmer directly. If you're purchasing directly from them, then you can say, do you use organic practices? What kind of chemical fertilizers or pesticides do you use, and so on. And so sometimes those definitions of what organic encompasses, or what pasture-raised or grain-fed encompasses that the United States Department of Agriculture says, sometimes those can get a little muddied and those definitions are hard to really understand. And so it's nice to be able to just have a conversation with the person who's growing your food and find out what they're doing and if that matches with what you find important to you yourself. Now, there are lots of different reasons why people might pick to consume local food. It might be because they want to support the local economy, and it might be because of environmental reasons, and those are incredibly valid and important. But today I'm going to focus more on the nutritional benefits of eating local food. So a major driver of the local food movement is the decline in nutritional quality of the modern day food supply. Our country has more obese people than any other country in the entire world. Adult obesity has increased by 60% within the last 20 years, and we're seeing even more rapid increases in childhood obesity and adolescent obesity. We have more diabetes and heart disease than ever before, and there are lots of contributing factors to this, but I would argue, especially being in the nutrition field, that our modern food supply is not helping us in this avenue, okay? So it's not really going to help us. And that's because conventional farmers are often pressured and rewarded financially when they produce large quantities of food in a very cheap manner. And so that affects the quantity of food that they're able to produce, and the affordability of that food is really what's driving that industry. And that has really caused a decrease in the quality of the food that we're producing. And this picture is a really great example of the types of products that are coming from this agricultural system. We've got a lot of cheap, highly processed, readily available food that is very low in nutritional quality. And that's a problem. These foods, I would argue, are contributing to our issues with chronic disease and obesity. So many Americans, despite getting plenty of calories or energy from this food, we're not getting enough vitamins and minerals and fiber and phytochemicals, those plant chemicals that can help protect us against chronic disease. So this slide lists some of the benefits of eating local food as far as for our health and for nutrition and palatability. And so some of the main reasons that people cite for eating local foods is improved taste and quality. Produce that is ripened on the vine, instead of being picked unripe and being transported or being treated with chemicals to either speed up the ripening or slow down the ripening, has a better texture, has a better taste, and has improved nutritional factors. Climacteric fruits are apples, nectarines, melons, apricots, peaches, and tomatoes, and these are capable of generating a ripening hormone, ethylene, after they've been picked. And so conventionally they'll be picked well before they're ripe. And studies have shown that although this helps with that long distance transport and it helps them to look great when they finally get to the grocery store shelf, they are lacking in vitamin C. So there's a nutritional component to that as well. Also, if you've had tomatoes at the grocery store when they're not in season, you know that there's a taste difference and there's a texture difference as well. Another issue for consuming local foods is variety. When farmers don't have to worry about producing foods that will hold up well in transport, or that will hold up well after they've been picked and a long time goes by before they're eaten, they can really focus on other things: the appearance of the food, the texture of the food, the taste of the food. So they're able to produce a wider variety of foods. If you've ever gone to the farmer's market, there's one vendor that has a wall of lettuce, and they'll have all kinds of different lettuces, types of lettuce that you may have never seen or ever heard of before. And that's because they can focus on that greater variety because they literally have picked it in that morning or the day before. And so that means that we get better tasting food, prettier food, and food that is more nutritious. Studies have shown that there's a decreased vitamin, mineral, and phytochemical content of many conventionally raised fruits and vegetables. And that's because the varieties that traditional farmers have to choose are ones that will hold up to that production line versus being the best tasting. Another issue with nutrition is the manner in which these foods are grown. So I mentioned that not all local farmers produce organically, but many of them do. And if you seek out farmers that are producing organically, you'll find that they have to rely more on high quality soil to produce their crops instead of chemicals to give the plants the nutrients to grow. And because of that, the plants grow deeper roots, and deeper roots mean that they take in more nutrients from the soil, and there are more nutrients available in that richer soil. So using manures, using cover crops, rotating their crops are all manners in which organic farmers use to enrich their soil, and that results in improved vitamin and mineral content as well. So, in summary, farmers growing for a local and especially a direct market are going to favor taste, they're going to favor nutrition diversity over durability or shippability when choosing varieties of foods to produce. And so greater crop diversity, more organic farming methods equal greater nutritional diversity for the eater. And like I said, most of the time, the foods that you find at the farmer's market have been picked within a 24-hour period before they're put on the shelf and before you purchase them. Now, meat, I focused more on produce, but meat is another area that's gaining some attention in the local food market because we're learning through research that the types of foods that animals eat and the way that they're raised can impact the nutritional quality of their meat. For example, beef that is finished and lives its entire life on a natural grass-fed diet has 5 times the amount of omega-3 fats than conventionally raised beef that's finished on grain in a feedlot. 5 times the amount of omega-3. So all that fish I've been telling you to eat, you could enjoy some beef and know that you're getting some of those omega-3s from beef. That's the same type of fat in fish that we try to encourage people to eat more of. It's also higher in vitamin E and vitamin A, which are important antioxidants, and it's lower in saturated fat. Now, it's a little more expensive because it takes a longer period of time to get that animal up to butcher weight. But depending on your income and the amount of money that you have available to purchase foods, that might be something that you can add to your diet. Chickens that eat a traditional diet of foraging for seeds and grasses and bugs have more omega-3 fats in their meat and in their eggs. So these are very healthy heart protective fats that we want to be eating more of. The traditional American diet is very lacking in. Okay, any questions about nutritional benefits of local food before we get into where to find it? Okay, the next section is where to find local food. So I'm going to cover several different areas, including CoxHealth, which is becoming a place where we are starting to see some local food. So the first one is farmers markets, and the Springfield area is very lucky that we have several very strong, very high quality farmers markets that are open several days a week that allow us to purchase local foods. Probably one of the biggest is Farmers Market of the Ozarks. This one's very close to the hospital. It's down here on Republic Road in the Farmers Park development area, and it operates year-round in a temperature-controlled pavilion. And if you've never been to the farmers market, this is one that's been named one of the top farmers markets in the country. They do a great job of running it, and it almost has a festival-like atmosphere with live music and all kinds of vendors, not just limited to farmers. I mean, they have food trucks, and we've done cooking demos there. So it's a really neat atmosphere to go to and to take children to, or take your family to enjoy. They see about 8,000 to 10,000 shoppers each week, so it's incredibly popular. And they have a variety of ways that you can pay for your food. You don't have to carry cash. You can use your credit card or debit card. They even take food stamps. The Greater Springfield Farmers Market is another nice one. It's available at Battlefield Mall, and it's actually open on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning time, and then on Saturdays as well. And they too accept a variety of payment forms. And then finally we have C Street City Market, which is a smaller farmers market located on the north side on Commercial Street. And despite being small, they do have a nice variety of produce. They also have eggs and different types of meat as well. The next type of avenue to purchase local food is a CSA. And CSAs are community supported agriculture. And let me just make a note really quick for those of you that are viewing this presentation online. At the end of the presentation, you will find resources for your specific area for Branson and Monette. A CSA is community supported agriculture, and this was first seen in the United States in the late 80s. It's based on ideas that came from Europe and Japan, and it's growing in popularity. The number of CSAs in the United States is thought to be around 3,000, and I was really surprised when I started to research CSAs how many of them are available in this area. It's basically a partnership between an eater and a farmer. And it's kind of like a subscription for food. And so you enter an agreement with a farmer and you pay up front, and in return for your monetary investment, you get a share of that farmer's produce or their goods for the growing season. Okay, so you pay the farmer up front, and then maybe on a weekly basis or an every other week basis, you go and get a pickup of whatever the farmer is producing, whether it's fruits and vegetables or eggs or meats, even bread. Some of the local ones have here in the Springfield area will have bread included on their share, fresh bread that's homemade. And many times with the CSA, there's a requirement for the eater to do some work on the farm as well as a part of their agreement. And that might sound a little daunting, but it can be a really fun thing to actually go to the farm where your food is being produced and see how the farmer's doing that production and actually get to share in some of the work, and you gain a new respect for how hard it is to produce food. So there are two CSAs in the Springfield area, and they happen to be run by brothers. The Millsap brothers, and one of them's up north of Springfield, and the Urban Roots Farm is actually right in the middle of town. They farm a very small area, I think less than 2 acres, and get all kinds of great stuff off of that small amount of land. Another neat thing about these CSAs, and from what goods we're seeing at the farmers market, is that in Missouri, where we have 4 distinct seasons, farmers are actually able to produce all year round. And so these CSAs offer winter shares where they use greenhouses, they use cold frames or row covers to extend the growing season. So we're not just limited to local food in the summertime. There's a really interesting new business that's available that offers home delivery of local foods, and it's from Real Farm Foods, and this is a family farm located in Norwood, and they really operate kind of like a food hub. And so a food hub is a place that goes out and finds or collects foods from other local farmers and then acts as a distribution point. And Real Farm Foods is different from a CSA in that they don't require any upfront financial commitment, And then number 2, you can choose what you get. So a CSA, you often don't choose what foods you get. You get whatever the farmer happens to be producing that week. But with Real Farm Foods, you can go online and place an order based on what they have available, and then a few days later they will actually deliver that food to your front door. So you leave a cooler out, and when you get home from work, you've got your local foods waiting for you. They do require a $25 minimum order, but it's incredibly convenient, and it stretches way beyond the Springfield area. I mean, they do this all the way as far west as Billings, and then because of Norwood being east of town, they go quite a ways east, in the Branson area too. So this is a really neat thing that is available to us here. Now we have a couple of grocery stores that cater almost exclusively to local foods, and those are listed here. So we have Homegrown Foods, which is located in Pickwick Place at the corner of Pickwick and Cherry. And actually last week we did a cooking demo in Branson for our Branson employees, and we purchased almost all of our ingredients from Homegrown Foods. So they have a lot of stuff there. They have a lot of produce, they have a lot of fresh baked goods, and then some locally produced processed foods as well. And then Horman Meats, which is located on West Battlefield. And if you've heard my presentations before, I really like Horman Meats. They offer all kinds of locally produced, pasture-raised beef and chicken, and then they have a variety of exotic meats too, seafood fresh from the Gulf and so on. So this is a really great place. It's kind of like a brick and mortar farmers market is kind of what they call themselves. Now, I often hear that the affordability of local foods is a problem for people, and I can recognize that that's the perception, but I wanted to show you, we actually did a little informal study here where we comparison shopped, and keep in mind we were pricing organic food that was available at a local grocery store, and then the cost of that same organic food purchased at the farmers market, which happened to be the one down here on Republic Road. So this is organic prices, and organic prices are going to be more expensive than conventional. But you can see the price comparison, and the total net savings from purchasing at the farmers market was $11.24 for all of these things. This was about a month ago, so different season slightly. We weren't all the way into the summer season. But $11.24. And so you can really, especially when focusing on organic or more natural farming methods, see a cost savings when you're purchasing directly from the farmer. And that makes sense because that production chain is shorter. Now, CoxHealth is actually doing some things to try to promote the consumption of local food, and I think it's really exciting. I think there's going to be much more of this to come because it's really a focus for some of the administrators and managers to seek out places to, companies to buy local food for the cafeteria, and then potentially even for patients. And some of this is kind of new and in the process, but I'll talk about what we're doing right now. They're purchasing food from Real Farm Foods, which is that farm in Norwood, and they're putting that on their salad bar. So we're getting lettuce from Real Farm Foods, I think a day or two of the week, not 100%, but some days a week, and then they're looking at featuring more of that local produce and meat. So keep an eye out in the cafeterias for signage that indicates what foods are being purchased locally. You might have noticed too that they're purchasing more products from local businesses, like the bagels, and I think they have some cookies too that they purchase locally. Now, something that I find really exciting that I hope comes into fruition is this idea of a hospital farm. And we're not just talking about some little small scale farm that looks good as people are driving by. I mean, we're talking about a real farm that's able to produce large quantities of food to be used within the health system. And at this point in time, we have land available. We actually even have a farmer who is willing to partner with the hospital to produce the food. What we're lacking in is looking for funding sources because of the startup and the equipment and so on. And so we've got people that are looking into grants and those types of things to secure some of that funding. So this is potentially something that could impact us here at the hospital, as we're actually growing some of our own food to be put into the cafeterias and maybe even for patients. Now, the most local type of food would of course be food that's in your own backyard, right? Because you can't get any shorter production chain than a few feet out the back door. So if you're interested in local food, especially if you feel like maybe this isn't something that you can really afford to do or have time to go out and find, is to maybe think about growing some food in your own backyard. And you can really start very small and simple. An 8 by 8 foot raised bed has the potential to produce $1,500 worth of produce over the span of a year. And so you don't need a lot of space, and you don't really need a lot of time commitment. You just need an 8 by 8 foot raised bed, or even a few pots. Or an herb garden is a really excellent way to start out doing this if you've never had a garden of any type, because herbs are really hardy and they're kind of like weeds and they're hard to kill. So if you don't have a green thumb, you might consider just purchasing a few little herb plants and putting those out on your porch in pots. And the benefit of that as well is that fresh herbs are really expensive to buy in the grocery store. I mean, you get like a little clamshell and it costs several dollars. And even those lack in some of the vibrant tastes that you can get when you actually are growing it yourself. So some ideas for that. I really like the book Square Foot Gardening. It has great suggestions for doing that small gardening where you garden up instead of gardening out if you don't have a lot of space. And then finally, when you are purchasing all of this local food and you have all this great produce and stuff in your refrigerator, what are you going to do with it? And I tend to recommend, especially with vegetables, when people aren't accustomed to eating lots of different types of vegetables, to look for ways that are very simple to prepare them and ways that cook them very minimally. Nobody likes, the Brussels sprouts that have been boiled to death and that are mushy and, pea green looking. So we want to cook things very minimally, add a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt and pepper so that they still retain some of that crisp texture. And that's really the way that many of these foods taste the best. So we're talking about grilling, which is a great method for preparing vegetables in the summer. Sauteing, roasting, maybe steaming. I put some of my favorite vegetables on the back of your handout, my favorite vegetable recipes that I've been trying this summer especially. And then I also really enjoy cookinglight.com. They have a Cooking Light garden, and they have a blog associated with that garden so that you can go through the growing season, and they'll post recipes based on the types of produce that they're getting from their garden. So that's a great place to go to look for seasonal, nutritious, freshly prepared ways to cook fruits and vegetables especially.